playwrights and would-be playwrights. Today I'm going to be talking about playwriting and what works for me. Hopefully you'll find some of what I say helpful too. What I would say to begin with is don't start too big. A short scene or sketch or a monologue is a really good way to start. One of my plays, The Order of Disorder, began as just a monologue. It's on my Writing Monologues video if you want to have a look at that. And I originally used it as an audition piece, and the idea for a longer piece emerged from reviews and performance and literary feedback. I was able to use the monologue as a starting point and point of reference to shape the rest of the play. Why not try writing 2 or 3 monologues to create a short scene and then break them up with interjections from the other characters? One of my pieces, called All Systems Go, was commissioned for Time to Change's 300 Voices project, and the commission was very specific in wanting 3 individual voices to be heard, relating their own personal experience of the same particular incident on a particular day. They wanted the voices to be very clear, giving their own points of view, but they didn't want monologues, they wanted an overall play. So how I formulated it was to write a monologue for each character, and then I intertwined the monologues so that I had a whole piece but broken down into the characters taking turns to speak their monologues, to tell their stories, rather than each speaking their monologue all in one go. And in fact the piece worked both ways, with the monologues intertwined or uninterrupted. It's a good way and a good place to start. Find your own way of working. I tend to start with an idea or even a line or a title and write in a linear way, beginning to middle to end. Sometimes I don't even know where the end of the play is until I get there. Of course, that's the way I write. Not everybody writes like that. Other writers will plan out the whole story out before they begin, create the characters first, know exactly where the piece is going before they ever commit a line of dialogue to paper. For me, I very often have an idea or a first line or a title, like I say, or receive a commission with a very specific brief, and I tend to let the stories and characters develop as I write the play, and that way they seem to gain layers and depth and become 3-dimensional characters and stories. Remember, you can always edit any inconsistencies if you decide to. I sometimes discover a flaw or a contradiction in a character compared to what I wrote earlier on that hasn't been intentional, actually works, and decide that it makes the character and play more interesting, so I leave it in. Remember, as human beings, we are full of inconsistencies, contradictions and paradoxes, so write them into your characters and your plays and your stories as well. When you're writing a play, you have to engage and then keep the audience interested. So really care about your characters, whether they're good or bad, whether you like them or dislike them, have emotions, feelings, thoughts about them. And a mix of the two, good and bad, is always more interesting in a character. So think of good films and drama series or soaps where they have the good guys and the bad guys, the villains and the heroes. What makes the characters more interesting is always if they do something perceived as out of character. So a villain doing an act of kindness, or a hero doing or saying something altogether unheroic. Those are the things that make us warm to those characters and give them depth. Always be aware of pace. Know what you want the overall pace to feel like, but remember that one pace throughout can get monotonous and lose an audience's attention really quickly. Even fast-paced and exciting pieces need some moments to let the audience catch their breath. I once saw a play where 3 strong characters who were competing for power literally shouted every single line and shouted their way through the play. The lack of variation in volume and pace made it very boring within a really short space of time. Observation is key in writing plays. It can help characterizations, it can help you build the worlds within your play. Even if your play is set in a world of pure fantasy, your observations of the world around you and the people within it can help your imagination in creating authentic stories and believable characters for whatever world you decide to write. Once you've written a scene or a few scenes, give them time to settle and process in your brain. Give them a break, give yourself a break. The same with the whole play. Once written, put it away for a few days and come back to it with fresh eyes after the break. You may find glaring holes that you hadn't noticed before. You may find really strong parts that you hadn't particularly paid attention to that really work for you. You can really develop further. Or you can just reconfirm that your play is brilliant and you've left it for a while and come back to just realise that. Once you've written a scene, read it back out loud. I've mentioned before that being a poet as well as a playwright, I often write in flowery language. So reading the dialogue aloud will immediately bring to light any dialogue that sounds false, inauthentic, or just not something a character would say or language that they would use. Once the play is at rehearsal stage, it may be that more dialogue doesn't ring true. Once other actors are starting to do a read-through, or if you're like me, you're an actor-writer, once you're actually getting to that point, you may find that it doesn't feel right and needs more editing and re-editing. So be prepared to keep editing right through from early writing to the rehearsal process. One of my most recent plays, what Myra did, had one character who used a lot of bad language. Now, I never put swearing or bad language into a play for the sake of it. It only gets written in if the voice of the character in my head uses the bad language. I do use bad language myself, sometimes, rarely. My characters only use it if they decide to, when the voice is in my head. However, showcasing an extract of what Myra did highlighted for me and the director that there was just too much. It just felt and sounded unnecessary. So I edited it, reduced the language, and then some months later, going into rehearsals for the full piece, I lost even more. And that way, what did remain was far more powerful and punchy and felt real. Even through rehearsals, I was editing and thinking, I can take that piece of bad language out there because it just sounds like it's too much. And be aware of that with any dialogue. Don't overdo things, don't overuse things. The audience will get your characters. So that's me. That's how I write a play. Maybe some of these tips will be useful for you, but the main thing is write what feels good and right for you in a style that you enjoy and using methods that work for you. There is no right or wrong way to work, just lots of different ways, and it's worth trying them all, exploring them all, and using what works, holding on to that, discarding what doesn't. If you want to send me any pieces that you write or film yourself performing after watching this, I'd love to read them or watch them. You know what to do and where to send them. Happy playwriting.